Hi, I'm Ray Abel from Zogo.
And I'm Dalton Banks.
Thank you. I wondered if you were going to say also from Zogo.
Oh, okay.
Dalton's just some random. No, it's fine. Don't worry. Cool. Okay. So, can you tell me a little bit about Banson Labs and your first product, Zogo?
Yeah, so we started out as a device that helps people with disabilities connect to consumer technology. And so basically what we do is we have a protocol interconverter box that takes any kind of input, whether it's USB, whether it's assistive tech, our own software platform, and we convert it into signals that standard tech can understand. So we can make a wheelchair joystick talk to an Xbox, or a standard USB PlayStation controller talk to a Spiro BB-8 robot. There's all these different devices that we can control. And that also works with smart home equipment, standard cable boxes, and other devices.
So what led you to become involved in the area of accessible tech?
Well, I saw some of the challenges firsthand growing up close to someone with a physical disability. And Ray's worked at the Muscular Dystrophy Association, so we both have some personal angles there, and started getting interested in developing tech for this population.
And then Dalton went to school and studied robotics and realized he could do something about it. And it was kind of a nice pairing of someone who had the robotics and engineering background with someone who had some of the business side of things, and we could pair together and try to make a company that's doing good.
How did you guys meet?
Tinder. So I actually met Dalton through a friend of a friend. I was actually at a house party, and someone added me on Facebook, and it was one of those people that add you on Facebook way too quick, so I almost denied the request, but I'm glad I didn't, because a couple weeks after that, he had posted an article about what was happening with Zogo, and so I thought, this is a company I want to talk to, and a person I want to talk to, and so I reached out, and that's how Dalton and I got connected, and that's been over 2 years now, so it's been a good relationship since, and since we're in a startup, I feel like it's the relationship I've had the most contact with of anyone in my life.
It's gonna have a video which is 10 minutes of you guys laughing like Beavis and Butthead.
I can actually see a little bit of a resemblance with both of us. Doesn't the one wear a hat and the other one have that like black hair?
I never watched it.
Yeah. Alright.
So we met at Build in Seattle when myself and Hyann appeared on stage with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. This isn't a question, it's just a humble brag. There's no question coming after this. No, I'm joking, there is. You've been working recently with some other really big corporate companies, and it feels to me like accessibility and inclusion is pretty high on the agenda. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's been nice that we've seen a bigger focus on accessibility with some of these companies. So we've had cable companies that are very large cable companies that have had engineers working on the side on their weekend hours just to get people connected, whether they had ALS or some other kind of disability. And you see situations like that, and then you see companies like Microsoft that have both a CEO that cares about accessibility and is focused on it, as well as a chief accessibility officer. And I think that's a role that's been increasing. And it's become less of an afterthought and more of something that really goes into good design. Because when you start designing for people with disabilities, you can build beautiful interfaces for everyone. And I think companies are finally starting to realize that. And I think that's a big change in the way companies are presenting accessibility as a whole.
Totally agree with that. I think that's something I'm kind of fully behind. I think it's the whole idea that you sort of build for what is actually the smallest group of people, but actually a growing number of people that have disabilities. We're an ageing population, and everyone's going to struggle at some point to use things. And
Yep.
I think it's kind of interesting to build for those people, and then sort of it will work for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things where, it's not really if you have a disability, it's when you have a disability, because every one of us in some way or another, whether it's short-term, long-term, whether it's aging, we're going to have some kind of issue that we need to overcome. And if you build software and hardware interfaces that are just simple and elegant and beautiful, it's going to be better for everyone. So I think it kind of goes back, a good example of that is when you start looking at like the late 90s, early 2000s, the design was, let's make everything skeuomorphic, and let's put felt on things like Apple used to do, and let's put like big bumps and rounded edges and all kinds of as much information as possible into these remote controls and TV guides. And now the goal is simplicity, and I think that's a guiding factor. And if you can open up that simplicity to make it work well for people with physical disabilities, it benefits everyone.
So you guys are technically a startup, but you've been doing some really interesting stuff in the last kind of 6 months to a year, working with some really good companies, getting a name for yourself. Have you got any kind of tips for someone who has an idea for an assistive tech product or a startup and they're not really sure how to get started with it?
Well, it's a good question. And first I'll say that assistive tech is definitely not the easiest industry to get started in as a startup. So probably the first thing I would say is if you have an idea for an assistive tech product, definitely try building it for someone you know, get it working, make sure that it really solves the problem. And then you get that kind of instant feedback and instant gratification as well before you think about turning it into a product. But there's just so much that needs to be done in the assistive tech world. So many products need to be built, and we're trying to figure out some of those market problems right now, and I think we're solving them.
Yeah, I think the big thing you have to have here is a passion for it, though. That's the thing that really separates the companies we've seen. Either there's no passion behind it and they're trying to just make money, which is, it's a business, you have to make money, but at the same time, there's a care and concern for your consumers, and that's missing with a lot of assistive tech companies. And when you go through and see these conferences with different assistive tech and what's new in the market, the people that are building the best devices are the ones who genuinely care about the population of people with disabilities. And I think that, if someone has the passion for it, even if you've never had any kind of business before, you've never done anything with manufacturing before, we never did manufacturing before, this is our first time going through it, but we have a passion to see people helped, and that's so important in this field because there's going to be a lot of setbacks, and a lot of times you'll hear things about, it's small markets, or really there's not a lot of people out there. There's a ton of people that could use this, but people don't get it if they're not close to someone with a disability themselves. So you have to have that passion, that drive to be able to overcome those objections and find a way to bring the product to market, because any startup's going to have those kind of problems, but when you're building something with a market that is smaller than the general consumer market, it is something that you have to, an extra barrier you have to overcome.
Nice.
But we need more people who have passion, that's for sure.
Well, I think the thing is, as well, with the kind of schedules that you're working to and, the hours that you're spending on it, if you didn't love it, it'd be really difficult. If you didn't fully believe in what you were doing, it'd be incredibly difficult, to kind of keep going at that same pulse. And if you have a startup, you have to do that, really, don't you?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And that's something I always say, like, if I was building another iPhone cable or something, I would not want to be doing this. It's just too much work for doing something you don't really truly care about. So I think that goes with any startup. You have to be passionate about it, but especially in this field, it's something that having that passion and that, I think a personal connection is good. But if you don't have a personal connection, like Dalton said, go out there and build something for someone who needs it, and start having those connections and seeing if you can really help, because there's a lot of need out there and not enough people trying to fill that need.
Thank you so much for talking to me, guys. I really appreciate it. So in our traditional sign-off way, I'm going to do an American sign-off and you're going to do an English one back at me. How about that? So bye, y'all.
That sounds perfect. Well, pip pip, chap. We will see you later.
Spit spot, cheerio.
That was much better than me.
It was way better.
Bye, Emma. Y'all.
Bye, guys.